We have today another conversation about psychology, and uh, it might get it might get for sure difficult because we talk about certain structures within the mind, um, specifically the so-called id, the ego, and the superego. But we come from a specific direction. When we have discussed in the past, and when I have done other podcasts in the past, one of the themes that naturally occurred was the question, what am I supposed to do, or how am I supposed to achieve my goals, right? Which is a very legitimate question for basically every adult, I would say. So within the working, if someone is in the workforce, then more naturally there are goals that I want to achieve in terms of career and appreciation and money and all these things, or power. And even when I'm not working, I still feel that I have the goal, that I have to find myself, I have to fulfill myself, I have to be good in sports, I have to do a hobby, and so on. Sometimes people are really satisfied and happy with those things that they pursue. And these are lucky cases. Often enough, people feel driven to achieve a certain goal without even a big fantasy of being happy afterwards, you know? So I feel like I want to gain more power because I hate this feeling of powerlessness within the company or within my bigger family. But when I think about it, if I have the power or when I achieve a little bit more power, it's not that it makes me happy. It just makes it's a little bit of a relief or something. So it puts in the question, it brings up the question, why do I feel the urge to pursue these things if the result is not truly satisfying or making me happy? And here we come to speak about the superego, because these are typical characteristics, the things that I have to do, the laws I have to abide by. Uh, so because we have touched so often in conversations upon these goal-driven um, motivations of most of us, we thought it might be interesting to get a little bit deeper into it. As a short introduction, in recent years, it proved to be useful to distinguish two aspects of the superego, and then I will explain a little bit more what the superego is.
Mhm.
One is the ideal self, and the other is the ought self, or the must self. The ideal self would be something that would really make me happy. So, I recently, as an actual example, I bought a guitar. I would like to learn the guitar, even though I'm oldish. So my brain is not, in the best state to absorb kind of fresh new information, and hand-eye coordination is not great. But it's something that I take, play some chords, and it's fun. It's just naive kind of fun. Not that I could play anything. It's just it's playful, and I like to tinker around and to play some very primitive chords and so on. So I would put kind of this endeavor of learning the guitar in the realm of the ideal self. Now let's take parents and a kid who are obsessed with the idea to have a really great guitar or piano playing kid, right? And
Mhm.
they push the kid to the limit, private classes every day, competitions every month, conservatorium, the whole shebang. Is anyone really enjoying this thing? In many cases, not. You have overachieving parents. You have the kid that wants to satisfy the parents. The most of it that they gain out of it is pride. It's like, my daughter, my son, look at them, first prize,
Mhm.
national, whatever, right? And the kid is, is happy if it can be proud of being the object of pride for their parents. It's like, oh, I did good. My parents are proud of me. Is there any fun or joy in that? Not so much. This clearly belongs in the category of the ought self, the must self, where it feels like I have to fulfill these things. Otherwise, I don't know, there will be a big lack in my self-esteem, maybe, or in me as a personality or a character. And I'm sure we can find more examples. I know that you have some examples from yourself where you are transitioning from turning some odd aspects into ideal aspects, so that that they're imbued with fun and joy. So that is a short introduction into the superego. Now let me explain a little bit what these three terms are. In English, they sound weirder than in the original German. So it was Freud who came up with those terms or popularized them largely. The id is the Latin word for it. So third person neutral, the it, and this is what it is in German. It's the normal word it, which kind of signifies that it's it's a driving force of our unconscious from which we are alienated. It's as if we say, it acts through me. When I cannot help myself to get a twitch in a certain situation, to become super nervous before an exam, even though I think that I'm super prepared and there's no reason at all to be anxious. So in all those situations where something from within seems to have its own agenda, its own personality, we feel alienated from it. We think, what the fuck is this within me that is doing that, this different person within me? So hence this alienated it, and then in the English it was given the Latin term id. Ego is more or less how I see myself, perceive myself, identify myself with. It's more complex than that, but in German it's just the word for me or I. So again, the English term is a little bit fancied up, again with the Latin term ego. And the third part, where the laws and rules are located, which drive me, the so-called superego, is in German literally the over me. In English it sounds a little bit like Superman or something. It just signifies that it seems to be the ruler that includes the laws that govern me, the judge within me, that we intuitively would locate above us, looking down on us, demanding things. So it's the over I, the over me, again in Latin terms, superego. I find it a little bit unfortunate that in the English becomes such intellectual terms, because originally I think they were conceived as something that should be much more accessible. Anyway, so that's a little bit the historical roundup. When we discuss it now, I will not pretend that I go back to the Freudian concepts. He introduced these terms, but I will speak much more from my own clinical experience than from a scholar of Freud or anything. Okay, so that as an introduction. And now please your comments or the topic that you suggest or questions that you would
Yeah,
with.
this is really helpful, Doc. Just to sort of like understand, the id, the ego, and the superego. And I have, I think, already 2 or 3 questions based on what you told me. So, question number 1 is, in the id, ego, superego, where does then the ideal and the ought self come, right? Like, are those like 2 separate or 2 different concepts altogether? Or are these, is it one concept and then, somehow something merges and it becomes the ideal and the ought self? So if you can elaborate on that, and then I have a couple other questions based on your example about the guitar and the hobby and the parents part as well.
Yes. So the first question is relatively simple. Both are parts or aspects of the superego, because
Okay.
both kind of tell us in very unambiguous terms what would be the right thing to do. The right thing to
Yeah.
do, the thing that I feel compelled to do, not because I'm driven by something alien within me. I do identify with that. So my kind of conscious inner voice is basically saying, yeah, I want to be successful. Yes, I want to be good at piano playing. I want to be powerful, right? So I'm
Yeah.
identified with that. It's not that I would be a hippie, very anti-power, very egalitarian, and then would have those discussions, the spurs of power grabbing, where I would shut people up and exclude them from conversations, and then reflecting, and it's like, what the hell was that? Like, what is this thing inside of me that makes me act in a completely different way than the ideals that I have? Then it would be something that I would count in the id, because then I'm not identified with it. I feel it as a strange, different being within me, like a demon that makes me do things that I don't stand behind. So in that sense, it could be located differently. But in the usual case, when I feel that I should do things or that I pursue things that would make me happy, both are
Yeah.
located in the superego.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So actually, like, let's take on that example and go a little bit deeper, and I'll come back to the guitar and the hobby example later. So correct me if I'm wrong. What you're saying is, both the ideal and not self live within the superego. One is, and sometimes the way it manifests itself are, the right thing to do in that scenario, but sometimes we act almost like as a different person, which I think we can all resonate. It happens to all of us, and we totally act in a very different manner. Now, I and I'll give you an example, right? Like, I will have an argument with my parents and I'll get really upset, or I'll have an argument with my brother, I'll get really upset because I genuinely hold the value that um, i should I should love my family, or I should at least love my brother. He's the only sibling I have. He's the
Yes.
only, historically, he's the only person who knows me from birth till death, kind of thing.
Yes.
The longest relationship I hold. I should be able to at least love him. um and that and anytime I have that argument, right after, the guilt comes knocking in and says,
Yes.
hello, what's happening?
Yes.
Why did you act in such a horrible manner? So
Yes.
is that like my ideal and the ought self? And then where should that, what value should I even hold? Like you first started and said, how should I live? What set of values should I live by? um so yeah.
Yes. So the practical aspect, we are not there yet, but
Hmm.
it serves as an example of, is it ought or is it ideal? This
Yeah.
is a good example for ought, because exactly what you said, the guilt kicks in, right? There is no particular joy in the satisfaction,
Hmm.
right, of
Yeah.
this urge.
Yeah.
It's more like a voice of decency that tells me, yeah, you should be more respectful, you should be more loving, you should be more caring, uh, as a voice that is in contrast to the to what was happening. So the conversation
Hmm.
was probably, I don't know, was an argument where
Yeah.
neither of you were like super respectful, right?
Hmm.
So if that was a conversation with a friend, I would say it's like, yeah, that was not a good meeting with my friend. Let me not see them for
Hmm.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
But then it comes in, but he's your brother. It's like a voice that comes from within, right? The
Yeah.
voice of duty. And that is a classic voice of the art self.
Interesting.
You should.
Okay. Yeah, you should be able to, love your only sibling.
Yes.
Or
And in
you should be
contrast,
able to. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
so yeah, to take to continue with the example, let's say we meet again next week, and now I feel a little bit more prepared, and I tell myself, okay, this today it will not go down as last week. I want to respect my brother more, so I'm much more contained. I'm much more
Hmm.
controlled, even when he provokes me. I stay calm, I stay respectful, and so on. Afterwards, I'm split, even though he provoked me, right? I'm split between, yeah, he was still a dick today,
Yeah.
but I did well, which doesn't make me super happy and joyous, I'm glad that I could control myself, or I'm glad that I could follow this law of you should respect your brother. Again, another
Yeah.
indication for the odd self, right? Because the ideal self,
Yeah.
in the satisfaction of that urge or that law,
Hmm.
I would be joyous and happy.
Yes, and I think you're right. Like even that second meeting when that generally happens is I will be prepared and I will make sure I won't say anything bad even though I get provoked.
Mhm.
Yet it never really leaves me with a good taste in my mouth. I just like, I'll be continuously thinking through the second meeting over and over again,
Yeah.
and there would still not be any joy in the interaction with him.
Yes.
So okay, I think I understand the ought self a little bit. We wouldn't say I've understood it entirely.
Well, can I give
Um,
another aspect of that? Because we can ask, where is that coming from? And I
yeah,
already gave a hint of it's as
like
if
which is the parents, right? The
it's
parents'
typically the
voice.
parents. I said something like it's like a voice
Yeah.
within that tells me what I should do, and this voice, what should it be? It's typically the parents, where we
Hmm.
internalize certain values from the outside, typically when we were kids, and
Hmm.
that's a very normal thing to do. Little children often want to kill each other, and
Yeah.
then the parents come and it's like, no, this is your brother, you should love him, or this is your sister, you have to take care of her, or something. And we hear these messages many, many times, and the parents also utter them with a sincerity, so it doesn't come off as a joke. uh,
Hmm.
and so we understand this is important for them, and
Yeah.
as completely helpless and completely dependent children, dependent on our parents, we kind of have to, where we cannot help it but to take those voices seriously. So we internalize them because we don't want to continuously disappoint our parents because we depend on them, right? So
Yeah.
their value becomes my value. Very typical
Yeah.
procedure
Yeah.
for the internalization of the
Yeah.
odd self.
Yeah. Even though as an adult, I hate it every time they put that pressure on me to,
Sure.
hey,
Yeah.
you need to still continue loving your brother, even though you're not. Okay. I think I finally get it. And um, now coming to the example of the ideal self and the odd self that you mentioned
Mm.
about, the example of the guitar, right?
Yes.
So having a hobby, statistically having a hobby has proven that it will give you joy.
Mhm.
So um, so as somebody like me who has a very strong, that ought self is a very strong personality in my brain, I think
Yeah.
I would be
Driving
like,
force.
well, I need to, yeah, it's a driving force. I need to have a hobby, and hence I need to learn guitar. And I
Yes.
actually better be at least somewhat decent at it, because a hobby is something that you have to be good at. So how should I be, like to your example of, the guitar really made me fun and happy, but sometimes something takes like 10,000 hours, or at least 1,000 hours, before I know it'll bring me happiness,
Hmm.
or it'll be joy. Like, how do you then balance that? Because to me, that, it takes practice to make something a hobby, even.
Yeah, I think it's too early to ask this question because
Hmm.
it's not, it's not that the ideal self and the odd self are neighbors, and then I can just move my furniture very easily into the other room. It's not like that.
Okay.
There is a very different logic in the two, and the odd self
Yeah.
demands mastery often enough, demands perfection, right? And then there is
Okay.
pride
Yeah.
or a certain satisfaction when
Hmm.
I approximated some sort of perfection in a situation. So I wanted to stay the alpha dog in the room. There was a meeting of bankers. Let's put the cliche out
Hmm.
there, right?
Yeah.
I went into the meeting and I maintained myself as the alpha dog. Now it's not
Yeah.
total perfection. I'm not the alpha dog of the whole world, but in that meeting, I walk out with swell breasts and can tell myself, haha,
Hmm.
I showed them who the man is. right?
Yeah.
So at that
Yeah.
moment, there is a satisfaction of the art self, because in
Yeah.
comparison to, I could achieve what was achievable in that situation, right?
So that,
So,
yeah.
mhm.
But either which way, right? Like, um, I would have come out very happy, right? If my auth self gets pleased, I do come out happy because I have been in those alpha dog meetings, and you come out on the top. You're like, hell yeah, I am the alpha dog today. Uh,
Yes.
so, so
Uh,
there is still joy there.
the Okay, let's keep that in mind, and let's try
Okay.
to contrast this further. It's it becomes fuzzy and complex pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the ideal self logic is that the satisfaction doesn't come with perfection, but with just doing the next step,
Action. Yeah.
right? So I want to paint, right? And then the art self tells me, okay, I want to be great in photorealistic painting. Like I want to be
Mm-hmm.
really good at that. And then there is joy or pride. The ideal self is like, I don't care. Like paint is funny. Colors are great. Just like do some smudges on paper. Cool. That's artistic. Not that I can sell it to anyone, but it was joy
Mm-hmm.
doing that. Right.
Right.
So this would be much more the expression of an ideal ego kind of thing, where sorry, ideal self kind of
Mm-hmm.
process, where I'm caught up in work, and then I think like, oh, it would be so nice to paint again, right? Not with the idea that I do something that can be sold or impress anyone or impress myself, but just to get it out, just for the joy of it. And then I do it, and then it doesn't matter much kind of how the quality is assessed by
Mm-hmm.
anyone else. It's just fun for me. So that would be a typical ideal self scenario.
So actually, let's take that example. And I'll give you my example. So, like, I love to write, or I think I love to write. Let's see if we do, right? Anytime I will write, I would be like, oh my God, this is the most fantastic thing I've ever written.
Mhm.
And I'll be
Okay.
very happy. And I
Yes.
would be like, this is brilliant. And I'll
Yes.
send it to a couple of my friends, and they would like come back and poke holes at it.
Hmm.
And I would be like, wow, it was really bad. But I still enjoyed myself, and I would still again write the next version and again be equally satisfied
Yes.
that it was brilliant and fantastic. And even though it's generally never is,
Uh-huh.
it does create. So now I do know. So based on that, I also realized, okay, maybe I am actually not as good a writer as I think I am. So maybe let me go do writing classes. But the writing classes demand that I be there, like, in the auth self, that I
Mhm.
sort of attend classes on a daily basis, and I do 100 days of writing and get feedback,
Yes.
and all of that. So now am I pushing my ideal self into the auth self? Because,
Kind
you
of.
know,
Yeah. It's pretty clear
so
from what
that
you
is
say,
wrong
right?
though, right?
Well,
Then,
you get a mixed result. That's what it is, because you mix two different contexts there. You enjoy for yourself
yeah.
the practice of writing. You like it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Love it.
then
Yeah.
so which is a process with yourself, like
Mm-hmm.
it's a feedback loop with yourself. You read what you wrote, you would change a
Yeah.
sentence, make it a little bit better, and then you're happy about it, and then you
Mm-hmm.
introduce a very different kind of logic by showing it to other people, which is
Right.
the logic of validation. uh, so
Yeah.
before you show it to someone, it's nothing. Only
No,
when
it's
they
not nothing. I love it still. Even
okay,
if
yes,
nobody
yes,
would have read it, I still love it. And I think it's brilliant. It's only when
right.
even when I go back and look at it 3 weeks later, I'm like, oh wow, that was terrible. but
Okay,
but
but
in that
different.
moment, I love it.
Yes, but what I mean, yes, I didn't say that kind of clearly enough. When you bring it to someone else, at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of almost nullify what you have done, and you hand over the power to define if it was good or not to the other people. Then you're kind of waiting. It's like, oh, I hope they like it, and then they say, nah, it's mediocre, and then that
Yeah.
part that was anticipating or hoping for validation is humbled. Right.
Yeah.
So you have given up the power. it would be different to say, you know what, if you're interested, you can read it. I don't care if you like it. It was fun for me. I think it's a good story. I don't need to sell it to anyone. I'm not interested to become a New York uh, New York
Yeah.
Times or whatever
Yeah. Bestseller. Yeah.
bestseller author.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
maybe you enjoy it. Who cares?
But but to that, I would say, isn't there value in, even if you're doing a hobby, isn't there value in like self-improvement, right? Like as somebody who likes to grow and learn in every aspect of my life,
Improve
whether
what?
it's my writing, improve my writing.
What does that mean? In the eyes of
Like
others or in the eyes of myself?
it, it has to be both, right? Like if I write you create, you do the writing, the first draft, you do it for yourself, and that's what you really like. But there is a certain pleasure in sort of like, sharing it, right? There is value and enjoyment in sharing what you really enjoyed. um, for example, you at some point will become a little bit good at music, and people will be like, hey, play it, and you will play it. And even
Mhm.
though you may not be perfect, there is enjoyment in sharing music, or doing it and playing the guitar in front of other people.
Yeah.
So
No,
there is value in enjoyment in sharing. So
absolutely, and that is still in the logic of the ideal self. But when I depend not on the sharing, but when I depend on them liking it, right? Then I'm seeking
ah,
validation.
okay, okay. So I shouldn't. Yeah, I see. So for me personally, in at least in my writing, and not in other aspects of my life, in my writing, I generally um, will just do it for my own self, and I'll
Mhm.
share it with my friends because I like to share things. But I don't care whether they like it or don't even give me feedback or give me feedback,
Yes.
because
Yes.
to me, it's just the act itself that
Yes.
of sharing that brings me joy. Okay,
Okay, we have
okay,
to get
that
a little bit further than that, because what we describe right now is a little bit the situation of a child that has painted something and shows it to the parents, right?
yeah.
So we have an interaction there,
Uh-huh.
and more typically when we talk about ideal self and odd self, none of that is going on in the outside world. It's happening in our mind only.
Yeah.
In the odd self logic, it's as if we seek the validation of our inner judge, because we have
Yep.
internalized the other's position, right?
Right.
I have to
Right.
be the best, and then there are some criteria of what the best is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I am my own judge, or the judge is within me. I typically don't need anyone anymore to tell me that I suck. And here we come to the problem, right? Because this odd self often
Mm-hmm.
enough it develops its own dynamic
Yeah.
that demands a level of perfection that is unattainable almost, which as a consequence leads to me again and again being uh, dismissed by my inner judge,
Mm-hmm.
or in more simple terms, again and again, I think that I suck, that I'm deficient, that I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And this is
Yeah.
where it turns into a problem. Many people in our kind of idealizing, success oriented
Mm-hmm.
society walk around with a feeling that they suck the whole time. And here it becomes relevant, because now we have
Yeah.
an actual problem, and people have cut themselves off from sources of joy because they don't know anymore how to switch from uh, that type of ideal satisfaction, the odd self, to a simple, naive form of enjoying something that I like to do.
S- I hear what you're saying, yet on the other hand, my question comes down to the practical level of how do I know if it's true or not? Like, if like my is it something that is coming from my odd self or the reality? So let's take an example, right?
Mhm.
So so I can give you two examples and you can pick either one of them.
Yeah.
So one example is my family always says this one thing. Probably you're very loving, but you do everything, but you're always rude you will always at some point or another get really rude, or angry and irritated, and like, ruin everything that you do, you ruin it by being rude and all. And to me, that seems like, if I step back, I'm like, yeah, that's true. But it's also true that I do everything. And my sibling will not do any work, but will be totally like, only be sweet and polite.
I will change this example because, again, we're looking at internalized voices. It's not about the parents. It's when I leave a situation, it's like, why was this fucking rude again? Why did I mess it up?
Exactly. I did
So
everything
then
and
it
I was
becomes
rude
relevant.
again. Yeah. And to me, that is true because I see myself doing that, right? Like I see myself saying no because their idea is entirely like stupid. But how do and I know I'm saying it in a rude manner, but it's probably because I'm exhausted of saying the same thing. And they're 100% right in saying that I am rude. So I agree with them. So now, is it an ought self or an ideal self? Or let's take another example. Let's
you
take
tell
a
me it's
career.
clear. It's not a difficult question. Of course, it's an ought.
No, it's not an ought. I think it's the truth.
Okay.
Because
I will tell you why. Or it's very simple. I hope you will get what I'm saying. The reality here doesn't matter. The effect matters. The emotional effect matters. When I end a situation and then I tell myself I suck, I don't tell myself, okay, I think that didn't go great. I think I did some things well. Let's see how next time I can improve it. That's a very different atmosphere. It's like a benevolent friend, right? I left the situation and then go to a friend. The friend asked, how did the presentation go? And I said, I think I did the content part well, but then when questions came, I think I was too rude. And then the friend's like, oh, okay, so let's discuss how you can do it differently next time. It's like, okay, yeah, let's look at it. That's a benevolent atmosphere, right? But when I leave the situation, it's like, I want to bury myself in shame. I was so bad. I knew that I wanted to avoid this rudeness, but again, I did it. Why am I so stupid? That's obviously odd.
Okay. I think I finally get the ought part, because for me, the way I do it is, God damn it, I was rude at the last second after I did everything. I'm so fucking stupid. I ruined the entire relationship. But again, and I shouldn't even bother trying next time. I shouldn't even go to visit my parents because I always fuck it up in the end. So, okay, so that's the ought self. Okay, now I get
hold that thought. Take the dialogue that you just said. Imagine that a parent is saying that to a kid.
Well, my parents do say that to me.
Okay. So. Imagine a different kid, 5 years old, having done a presentation in front of class. All parents are there.
Yeah.
It ends. And then the parents say, why were you so fucking stupid to mess it up in the end? You will never do presentations as we told you. We have told you 100 times. Why did we practice this? And so on. What do you imagine is the effect on the kid?
Horrible, right? Like the poor kid has no confidence left in them.
Devastating.
Devastating, yeah.
And now we think we are all that great adults. And most of the listeners are, in 20 to the mid-50s. We are all mature. We think we can handle that when we tell ourselves these same messages. No, we don't. It has the same devastating effect on us. That we don't break down crying because we tell ourselves these things doesn't mean that it doesn't have a devastating effect on us. It has, because the implications of the words are so judgmental. Again, just transpose it into an interpersonal relationship. If a friend tells you, why were you so fucking stupid? You messed it up in the last minute. Didn't we rehearse it? It would be so painful to hear that. And just because we don't react emotionally, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, as a kid would do, or would do in front of friends or something, doesn't mean that it has the same effect. So many people with this odd self prominence are walking around judging themselves in the harshest way because they have no filters in their internal monologue, telling themselves that they're stupid, that they should do better, and so on. And then how surprised should we be when we see them with lack of energy, with little joy, with
Mm-hmm.
little internal kind of naive, joyful motivation to do things? Is that surprising? No. They
Okay.
expose themselves so much to the internal judge without filter. They must suffer from these words.
Okay. Okay. I think I think I kind of understand it better now, because I was thinking of the superego as more of, the set of values that I should live by, which is I should be polite, which I actually kind of wrote down as I was thinking about our conversation today. Is like, I should be kinder to people. I should be loving to my family. I should be polite. Um,
Yes, nothing wrong with
and
that. And it is the superego. The question
it
is,
is,
again, what is the reaction to it when I feel that I didn't get that I didn't fulfill it? Here it becomes critical.
yeah.
So I should be more kind.
Mm-hmm.
And then I left kind of a circle of friends and I asked myself, did I live up to my values?
Mm-hmm.
And if then I'm kind to myself, because that would be an ideal application of I should be kind, it's like, yeah, I think I should be kinder, but you know what? I forgive myself for not being super aware, super nice all the time. Next time I will be better. And then, I reflect a little bit on the psychology of why I
Yeah.
left my value. Okay, so that is a nice thing. Still super
Mm-hmm.
ego, but not
Yeah.
an odd self. Odd self, always the characteristic of judging
Mm-hmm.
and of a rude kind of telling myself off. It doesn't matter if it's
Okay.
about kindness, if it's about money or power
Uh-huh.
or love. These are
Yeah.
just items. It's just a symbol X, X,
Okay.
X, Y, Z. The reaction is important.
Okay.
The
Okay.
effect, the voice that it comes with.
Okay. I think I understand it a little bit better now. So then, Doc, the question that sort of comes is back to the same example that you used with the guitar and the parents sort of,
Mhm.
you know, pushing the kid to do all the classes, making them go to recitals and whatnot.
Yes.
And but in that situation, in the parents' defense, the parents are teaching the kid how to become proud of themselves, right? That's, they're like, oh, I'm proud of my son, and they teach them how to become proud of themselves. And it's something that the parents need to teach the kid, because the kid needs to learn to be proud of themselves.
Mhm.
And that is why they make the kid do all these certain activities, right? So so then the question becomes, as an adult, how do you sort of, you know like, how do you create that balance of being proud of yourself without being that overtly stupid, full of ego? Or I ego is a weird word using in this context, but like we say to other people, oh my God, this person's so egotistical. They
Yes.
just
Yeah.
like, how do you create that balance is then the question, right? Like, how do you, like, because the reason why I asked this question is I was thinking, like, the reason why I'm doing this writing and then doing all these writing classes to improve my skill set, because I want to be proud of my writing.
Mhm.
I enjoy it, but I also want to be proud of my writing,
Yeah.
is the reason why I was going for those writing classes. So so that's my question then. So.
Well, again, I when you say pride, it doesn't matter much to me because there are so many facets and varieties of that. And again, my question would be, is the validation possible without the pride? To put it again, to transpose it into the situation of parents and kids, does the kid
Mm-hmm.
feel that it's loved and validated even though it doesn't win in spelling bee or the piano competition? Does it
Mm-hmm.
think I'm absolutely nothing if I don't win? They don't look at me, they don't love me, they don't think I'm valuable, nothing, right? That is one extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere in the middle is something that I think you described, I guess, you,
Yeah.
you implied. It's not that, there's, Oh, still the hugging. There's like, yeah, did it well, next time maybe better, but not the look of dissatisfaction, the look of disappointment, or not even looking or ignoring the kid, and so on. So it's a gentle nudge to the
Mm-hmm.
kids, like, if it makes you happy, next year we come back, and then you'll see if you want to be better. Let's see how much work
Yeah.
you want to put into it, right? It's kind of in connection with what the kid seems to enjoy, and not just imposing my value because I think that my kid should be in a beauty pageant or a piano class or something, without
Mm-hmm.
looking at all at the drives of the kid itself. And here we come to the kind of more practical aspect when we as adults look at our mental household, right? I catch
Mm-hmm.
myself slavishly following an odd demand.
Yeah.
And then I ask myself, okay, well, that doesn't give me any joy. That's just a drag in my life. What am I
Mm-hmm.
supposed to do? What I'm supposed to do is I start I start chewing. Again, I like this
Mm-hmm.
word when it comes to psychology. I start chewing this internal judge and ask myself, is that a voice that I want to be in my head? Do I want
Yeah.
this? Or is it something that is involuntarily in my mind? And here, so I can do it on different levels. If I want to do it biographically, I can go back. It's like, is that what I wanted myself when my parents taught me to have this value?
Mm-hmm.
Do I appreciate it with others when they have this value? Do I fully stand behind it? And if not, and identify this judge that I always should be caring or always should be powerful or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
when I identify it as alien, when I think, no, it's empty. I don't even know why I pursue this. It doesn't give me anything. Like
Yeah.
the kid who realizes as a 16-year-old, I don't care about piano. I don't know why they make me go through this. I don't care. It doesn't give me anything. I just do it for their sake. Then my duty as the developing, maturing individual is to replace it with something that I can stand behind. Maybe it's something adjacent, close to
Mm-hmm.
it. Uh, Maybe it's something completely different. So when it comes to power, and my overachieving parents were like, you always have to be the top dog, right? Let's say this was the rule.
Yeah.
I internalized it. I realized that I'm much more, soft, much more moderate than that. Then I can ask myself, okay, do I want those to throw this out, or is there some value to it?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a limitation of this rule? Not, it's always good to be powerful, but for example, it's good to be able to be powerful when I need to protect myself so that people don't step over me. And then I've turned into my thing. I started with contemplation. What is it that I
Mm-hmm.
want? I come to see kind of variations of this very rigid rule that resonate with me, right? It's just an example, but where I think like,
Yeah.
oh, that's so much more me, that's so much more meaningful from my daily life. Yes, I can stand behind that. And then I work on implementing that into my mind and excluding the rigid role, the rigid rule, the rigid judge that I had when I didn't reflect myself on this
Mm.
internalized, incorporated odd self.
Okay. I I hear what you're saying, and but I am not quite sure I understand it. So can
Mhm.
I give you another example, which is also very true, right?
Yeah.
So the way I see what you're saying is, you start to question what are the things that bring you happiness. But the way I think of it is our brains are so complicated and so complex that I believe there's like, also benefit to, some of the things that, some of the values that our parents sort of overachieving as an example, right?
Mhm.
There's a benefit or a value to what our parents inculcate in us, right? So uh, an example again here is like the career example, right? I don't think I want to be the top level person in my field, yet I see my peers and my friends who are going there, and I see the benefit of it. There's always a benefit to everything, right? And a cost. There's a benefit of them sort of, having a lot more money and having a lot more luxury in their life. And then, yet on the other hand, I also see them being very extremely unhappy. So how do you, in that scenario, when there is a push and a pull both towards those kind of values, right? There's a push, which is you don't want to go there because you're going to be unhappy in the
Mhm.
end. Yet there is still a little bit of that pull because you're saying, you know what, it is something that the society admires. Again, the validation sort of comes in a little bit. How do you let go of those validation rules, right? Because validation is sort of something so inculcated in our society and in each of us, right? When I say society, I mean like each and every one of us. We all want.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's. I think it's very simple. I'm completely kind of. I'm non-judgmental in that. My
Hmm.
only kind of urges, I'm not saying be a good Christian or be humble or something like that. Choose the values that you can fully stand behind. If I'm following a rule, no matter what it is, be kind always or be an asshole always, doesn't matter. If I
Yeah.
find myself having a voice in my head that makes me do things that I cannot stand fully behind,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't. I was told be always nice, or as a girl, I was raised with be always the nice, pleasing girl. Don't be too
Yeah.
rude. Don't be too loud. Don't always be elegant. I don't know what kind of crap girls are brought up with
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, right? And I find myself, it's like, ah, no, it feels like a cage. I don't want this.
Mm-hmm.
If I do find it, if I do want it, and I fully resonate with that, great, right? I'm talking about the case where it feels off. And when it feels off, I have to ask myself, what is a value that resonates more with me? And then, whatever it is, when I find that, I occupy that place. I allow myself to fully identify with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I start acting out, acting it, living it, until the
Mm-hmm.
day when I have to question it again. For example, it's always a process. It's we spoke about it in different contexts.
Yeah.
It never stops. This process never stops. I always have to adjust, not every day, but
Yeah.
regularly. So, for example, we take this simple example. It's a little bit cliche, but the girl that was taught always be nice when it becomes
Yeah.
a late teen or a young adult, realizing I want something else. I want
I
to
was
be
always
strong.
taught that, by the way, but I was never that. So, which is
Right.
where that, I was never, I was never the nice person. I was always the one who would like honestly just say stuff.
Yes.
So,
So yes,
um,
a girl might come to the conclusion, okay, let me be strong-headed, let me be rude,
at
let
least
me
I'll be honest, is how I would describe myself.
honest, let me be without filters. Okay. Now I
Hmm.
do this for a couple of years or for 6 months, it doesn't matter. And then
Well,
I
do it for
realize
20 years is what really people do. Like,
I'm talking about an ideal kind of process, right?
okay,
So I'm
okay,
doing it for a while. And
yeah.
then I ask myself, how does it go? How did that work out for myself? And then I realized, okay, I was more happy with my stronger stand, but I lost many friends, for example.
Hmm.
And then I'm asking
Yeah.
myself, am I okay with losing those friends? Because I don't want to have friends who are based only on me being nice. Or
Hmm.
am I not okay? And here I want to pick up what you said before. Validation is important for us, for most people. For
Yeah.
many people, they're not kind of strong-headed in the sense that some people in history were, and some people are, that they don't care if they completely isolate themselves due to their
Hmm.
personality. I might come to the conclusion, you know what? It's important for me to have some friends, even sometimes if they're superficial. So, consequence, again, I will adjust my rule. I will change this. Always speak your mind. Have no filters. Be rude if you want to. I change it
Hmm.
into do it in certain situations, and when you talk to people that you want to befriend, tone it down.
Yeah.
Right? I might come to that conclusion. I'm not saying that this is the right way. It's just an example for a process where after a while I do an assessment. I had an
Yeah.
idea for a certain value that it would do me good. I implemented it, and now I look and I see, is it really good for me or not? And if it's not, I find a new standard, a new kind of better resonance. Same thing. I live it for a while and then I review it.
Okay. Okay. I think I get it a little bit more. Like, you know, the whole, okay, I'll do it in certain situations or not, and the way I put it back in my values is, okay, I'm going to create a balance between, being loving towards the people I want to love, and being while being honest with them, but in a more, you
Right.
know loving manner, kind of thing. So, like, that is what I sort of like put back into my, if I could, like, just I as a computer put it back in my
Sure.
head,
Right.
that's how I would do it. Okay. Okay, that I think now I finally get that, you know the that division that was happening between the ideal and the auth self. um, because I think if I create that balance, like you said, right, that will create that, in certain examples, when I have certain been able to create that balance, that is where I've experienced more joy, or
Yes, exactly.
more peace. I don't know how to, yeah,
Yeah.
like joy or peace, where I'm like, okay, yes, I love my brother, but I'm not going to let him walk all over me.
Mhm.
So I will talk to him politely. But the minute he starts misbehaving, I will cut off the conversation immediately and
For
walk
example,
away.
yes.
Yeah, for example, yeah. Okay. Perfect. Now, can we take one more example just to, like, make sure I fully understand it? Or do we think it's plenty time? Um,
Well, if you show me an aspect where you're not sure if you got the concept, then
y-
I'm happy to jump onto that.
okay. Um, let's take the example of a woman, sort of, as a woman growing up in the 90s, and in the 80s and 90s. There was a lot of conversations about being, as a woman, you need to be financially independent, right?
Yes.
um, so one of the values I inculcated in my head was I should not depend on my partner financially.
Hmm.
And that, like, for me, that is a very good ought self. Like, that's a very good value to hold. Yet on the other hand, if I ever go through a circumstance where I do need to depend on my partner financially, it creates absolute havoc in my brain.
So
So
it's not good.
again, here,
That was
yeah,
the effect. Okay.
but I still believe it's a very good value to hold. So now, do I need to, like, convert it back into my own brain and say, okay, that should be an overarching rule, but it's okay to have some exceptions? Is that, like, how do you break that down, right? Like,
I would
like
say
the things that,
clearly yes. Clearly yes. Whatever I take from the outside, like you said, you
Mhm.
introduced it very nicely. There
Yeah.
was a discourse, there was a zeitgeist, there was an
Hmm.
atmosphere, there was a political and sociological exchange of arguments in favor of financial independence, right?
Hmm.
It's in the outside.
But it
And
makes
then
sense too.
that is not my point. I don't care.
Okay.
It's on the outside.
Okay.
And because I'm part of society, of course, it makes sense to me,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So I incorporated, as I did in the other examples, incorporate and internalize a value of my parents. It's not mine. When I take it from the outside, as it's
Hmm.
printed in the letter, and I put it into my mind, it's not mine. It cannot be, it cannot fully resonate with me.
It
Nobody
is mine,
is,
though. It fully resonates with me.
uh, then here we have the point where I think the example is not clear or the concept is not clear. Because if it resonates with me, I feel complete with that. It feels like an extension of me, and I don't run into a situation where this value gives me issues. And you said, yes, okay, this value is great. I generally like it, but in a situation where I have to depend on my partner financially, it sucks. Well, that's the whole thing.
Yeah,
It
okay.
claims
I see.
independence
So
from
then
you.
it's going in the odd self because it starts to suck if the situation changes, even
Right.
temporarily.
Right.
Um,
So my contribution is I take what kind of I see generally as a good contribution, and then I think about, okay, what are the limits to this? Under which circumstances does it stop to work? Under which circumstances do I want it to flip into a different value? For example, that I'm able to accept help from people, from my
mhm.
partner, from my family, right? And
Okay.
then it becomes with those questions where I figure out, okay, not in this way, not too soon, not too much, or whatever it is, right? I
Yeah.
figure that out for myself. And then I
Mhm.
realize, oh, okay, under these circumstances, I would be completely fine with that. And
Okay.
then I adapt kind of this general rule that came from the outside. That was like a blanket argument without,
Mhm.
differentiation, which is the discourse, the
Yeah.
societal discourse. And then I make it
Yeah.
mine, and I live with it for a
Okay.
while.
Okay. Okay. I I I th- I get it. Okay.
Right?
That was the only example I was having a tough time sort of like
Okay.
I had a whole list of examples and I was like, okay, this one makes sense, this one makes sense. But that one was the one where I was still getting stuck on because it resonated so deeply with me.
Yeah.
But I think I would have to then say, okay, you know what, if it's a temp in my mind, I would have to say, okay, if it's a temporary situation or if it's a situation where it's for a little bit, in those circumstances it's okay, and like
Mhm.
creating those own rules for myself, like you say. Perfect. Okay, I think now I kind of get the whole ideal and ought self,
Mhm.
um, at least to a degree. And basically, if it's not making me happy, but I still keep trying to do things, that's when I need to stop, check in with myself, and say, does this particular action needs, what's the value that I'm holding
Yes.
here? And does it need to be improved, edited, or moved or removed altogether, kind of thing?
Yes. I do have to
Oh,
change the settings, basically, specifically for myself.
yeah.
Now, just to give the listener an idea of where this discussion would continue, because we actually dealt with a simple part. I said, so I realize if the value is good for me, and then I change it for myself. So
Hmm.
that is clear. In many situations, it remains very stubborn. So I might realize these things, I think them through, I understand what the value is that I want to have in my mind in contrast to what the value is that is in my mind, this odd self. And then the process becomes much more difficult, and I basically don't know how to put this new value that I resonate more with
Hmm.
into the functional place of the judge. So this is where it would continue, where it becomes more critical and more complex of how to do those kind of mechanics of how to throw the judge out and to
Hmm.
install a new judge. That is sometimes not very easy. Those in internalized judges, laws, values, rules can be very, very stubborn and don't
Yeah.
they squat the place. They don't want to leave.
Hmm.
So we might continue at that point in a future
Yeah.
discussion, because then it becomes more practically relevant for people who have
Mm.
issues with their odd self. Okay.
What's an example, just quickly for users to, or listeners to think about, what's an example of a really stubborn judge, right? Like that's really stubborn superego that is
It
unwilling to
can be anything.
change.
It can be anything. I have to be successful no matter what. I have to become the CEO,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then me kind of thinking, no, I don't need to be the CEO. It wouldn't. I know it wouldn't even make me happy And yet the
Mm-hmm.
voice in my head keeps hammering on and makes me dissatisfied without me wanting it, and so on. Each year when I have my validation round with my bosses, I go in prepared thinking I will be humble, I will accept what they say, I want to moderately improve, I don't want to become the next CEO, but yet afterwards I still cannot sleep. And ideas are shooting
Yeah.
through my mind. It's like, oh, you loser, and you should have done better, and so on. And it just leaves me conflicted. The one voice that says, no, I don't need it, and the other voice is, you suck. So but it
Mm-hmm.
can be really anything.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's leave it at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we will continue at another time to get into more practical details of how to dislocate, of how to throw out the judge and the inner judge in these situations. Is that okay?
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you. This was really helpful, Doc. And I hope the listeners also get some value from it.
Okay, me too. Thank you.